I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
The Pinch Hitters with Boz and Pav. Bozza's Rant.
Now that we've started off on a real positive, it's time for Bozza to just puff that chest out a little bit and get into just a little rant. This is always fun to listen to.
The football world released a collective sigh of relief this week when Brownlow fancy Dustin Martin was let off with a fine for improper contact with Nick Robertson. The consensus amongst football fans seemed to be that common sense had prevailed, despite the fact that 2 weeks earlier a similar offence drew a different response from the MRP. It is extraordinary the gymnastics that the MRP performed to manufacture the outcome it desires. A case in point is St Kilda's Jimmy Webster, who must be wondering what has changed in the fortnight since he was offered a 2-week ban from the same panel for the same offence. Earlier this year, Jimmy Bartell spoke of the constraints of the system the NRP is working under, and here's Jimmy.
So we're handcuffed by, and I've explained it a number of times, going through the table.
Yes, left to right.
Left to right. But when it comes out at the right, you find it hard to justify. And a lot of people have said, well, we should be able to you should fine them 10 grand or 5 grand and, your goose tax. But we can't make up the fine. The fine's there. Like, we just have to go, well...
Yes, the penalty's already there.
The penalty's already there, laid out. A lot of conversation was had about it, and it was just over that intentional or careless and back and forth, and everyone was 100% agreeance in the MRP. But the majority in the MRP settled on careless.
With due respect to Bartell speaking on RSN there, the facts just don't support his assertion. To review both Martin and Cochin, because that was him talking about the Trent Cochin jumper punch case earlier in the year, and decide that the incidents were careless rather than deliberate is bewildering. The only way to explain the inexplicable findings is that they actually went from right to left rather than the left to right that he discussed there, starting with an outcome in mind rather than deciding it upon the assessment of the facts. Time and again, the review panel has done this and ignored the facts to make their judgment based on the possible outcomes of the finding. The two most famous instances are the case of Barry Hall in 2005 and Chris Judd in 2010. To allow Hall to play in the 2005 grand final, the MRP decided that he'd struck Matt Maguire in play despite being over 100 metres away from the ball. And Judd owes his status as a dual Brownlow medalist to the fact that the MRP found that the force of his strike that saw Matthew Pavlich receive a cut that required Staples to close was below the standard required to constitute a reportable offence. It is fair to say that the only area in which the MRP has remained consistent is in its own inconsistency. That said, Jimmy Webster should probably look inward and rather towards the review panel to blame for his suspension. You can't possibly expect to avoid the MRP's wrath if you don't go to the trouble of putting yourself in contention for Brownlow or Premiership medals.
Take that for data.
The Pinch Hitters with Boz and Pav. Your weekly take on sport from the cheap seats.